respectable. Hey friends, it's KT. This is the Adventure Force Monolith, and I was pretty excited for this to come out because the Perses has become pretty unobtainable. And at 35 bucks, I can't remember what I paid for this already. This feels like it could fill that hole, assuming that it can be modified easily. And so we're gonna figure that out. I don't have any kind of guide or anything, and I haven't opened this up, and I only have one of them. So we're just gonna rip into it and see what we can do to it. Simple as that. The door to this popped off really easily, but did not break. It looks like a design feature. It just kind of pops off if you overextend it. And that's actually nice, because the alternative is a crappy hinge that snaps. So I think we can just start unscrewing stuff. Look at this. Okay, this is exciting. Inside here, there's an actual clip attaching the battery tray to the rest of the blaster. So you can unplug it. They knew we were gonna open this up. That's awesome. So you've got your rev trigger, which has a safety built into it. There's no safety piece in between the rev trigger and the actual trigger, which is kind of cool. It's literally one piece. You pull that back and it allows this to move. So this presses this switch that activates the flywheels, and then this activates the treadmill here. We're gonna do a dual MOSFET on this, one for the conveyor and one for the motors. And we're gonna keep it pretty simple. Like rival motors, they should be able to handle the higher voltage. I'm only going to 2S, so hopefully that won't run the motors out too quick. And we'll kind of get a feel for how this thing acts. I am really impressed with how easy this thing is to take apart. This is the entire conveyor mechanism. 3 screws, and it came right out. Now I have complete access to the motor cage. It's really hard to tell with Dark Zone stuff whether it's simple because they're trying to keep costs down while still making a decent product, or it's simple to allow for modding. Because Dark Zone does seem to have much more of a finger on the pulse of the modding community. Yep, we're good. It's going the right way. There's like a ton of space in the back of this, and so we're gonna put the MOSFETs just kind of down here somewhere. So these out of darts MOSFET boards are so great. They're really, really clearly labeled. There's just battery on one side, motor on the other, positive and negative, super obvious. Really appreciate them a lot. If you're already a modder and you've done switch replacement flywheel mods, the MOSFET thing can sound daunting, like a more advanced version of what you've already been doing, and it's really not. In a lot of ways it's simple. There's a lot less mechanical work in terms of modifying the way the blaster is laid out, and slightly more soldering. $7 might sound like a decent bit to do this, but realize that it completely replaces the switches I wouldn't recommend this on a blaster that you have thrifted. I would only do this on newer blasters. On an older blaster, these little switches are probably on their way out if the blaster's been played with. But on a newer blaster, these still should have thousands of presses left in them. So it's worth it to do the MOSFET version of this mod, knowing that you'll get plenty of life out of those switches. Okay, so this is actually a pretty simple setup, although it looks like there's a lot going on. So I want to talk through it real quick for anyone who wants to try to replicate this. We've got the battery connector coming through. I just took out the D battery dividers and left the battery tray intact because I'm not 100% sure yet whether or not this mod is going to be worthwhile. That way I can always go back if I want to. There's a battery connector from the original one. I'm just ignoring it and leaving it for now. But I replicated that by putting another connector pair here. You don't have to do that. You could just go straight through to a battery connector if you want. From the battery connector, it actually splits to 2 different power and 2 different ground connectors. They go appropriately to the battery connectors on both of these. I have these heat shrinked with clear heat shrink. I just think that's the easiest way in a setup like this to simply be able to stuff them in and not worry about short circuits inside the device. The switch for the motors goes to the rev switch. The switch for the conveyor goes to the firing switch. If you are comfortable soldering, I suggest re-soldering these switches. The soldering from the factory was really, really bad. If you are not a comfortable solderer, I suggest not doing it because these switches are very easy to burn out and melt if you apply too much heat. I've already tested this with the LiPo, everything works. I just need to run the cables and then we are good to close this sucker up. And because of my heat shrinking, I can literally just stuff these puppies in here. Very nice. Let's take it outside. It is cricket season here, and it is also commute time, so pardon the extra noise. We're going to shoot this thing into the chronograph, and we're going to try and get some numbers, and we're going to try to get some sense of whether it's shooting more rapidly. Reasonable control over the firing. I'm more or less getting a round off when I pull the trigger. So I'm just gonna hold it down and see what I get constantly firing. Not bad. Well, there's my first jam, and I think I slightly overloaded it. Respectable. First of all, full disclosure, I don't own a Perses, so I have relatively little hands-on experience with them, so I'm definitely leaning into existing YouTube footage of them for comparisons. I'm also not being very scientific. I didn't take any numbers or do anything to this before modding it, so I'm definitely leaning into stock reviews of the blaster that already exist online, especially the reviews by American Foam and by Drac. In terms of chronograph numbers, with the 2S LiPo, I'm seeing about 107 feet per second on average, with semi-auto shots hitting on the higher end of that range and sustained fire dropping down somewhat. That's about a 10 FPS boost based on existing reviews. The main thing that I was looking for with this is improved firing consistency, and I do think that we achieved that. Because the conveyor belt is moving faster, you're getting more balls fed into the wheels, and it's easier to get full auto spray without having to constantly shake the blaster. I can also get pretty consistent semi-auto. It's not perfect, but it's a big improvement. So I feel like now we have a blaster that's field usable. You're still going to be outclassed by a 3S Perses or a proton pack with a Jupiter attached to it, but you're also working with a much more nimble, smaller blaster. You're also in a much more affordable class, with a $30 blaster, 2 $7 MOSFET boards, and then the LiPo for about $20, and then connectors and wire. You're still well under $100, which is what a stock Perses is typically going to cost you today. It's also really easy to put together a cheap loadout for this. I grabbed some paintball canisters and a belt. With just these 2 canisters, I can reload this completely twice and top it off one extra time. Another really great way to hold ammo for this, hyper canisters. They're completely compatible, they slide right off, but I'm told by Jolt King 627 that the 100-round hyper canisters hold about 25 rival rounds. So if you stick 2 of the 100-round canisters on the top, you have a complete reload plus a top off, easy. And for my fellow parents, this is the perfect thing for your kid's first competitive modded flywheeler. It is small and light. It has a grip that's as comfortable for adult hands as it is for small hands. It offers a good balance between targeted shooting and spray and pray style gameplay, and it is super easy to reload. So is this, as some have suggested, the $30 Perses? Well, no, and yes. It offers its own thing. It has its own play style. I think it's going to shine in shorter rounds and with younger players. I also really do recommend this for anyone who's looking to do their first flywheeler mod. There's a ton of space inside this blaster, very little going on. It's extremely straightforward. You can really focus on just practicing your soldering skills and not worry about having to navigate the inside of the blaster at the same time. We'll see if the community steps up and designs some things to expand what this is capable of. I think it's a viable platform. It may not be something that we want to put 3S LiPo into. With such a small ammo container, you'd spend through it quite quickly if you increase the rate of fire that much. But maybe someone will design a way to increase the ammo capacity. So what do you think? Leave a comment below and let me know if you think that this is usable, if you'd play with it. If you enjoyed this, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you on the field.